Hi, how you doing? We're going to do another fight breakdown. This time we're going to look at a fight from a film that I personally didn't really enjoy, but a lot of you have asked for this fight specifically, and it's a pretty good fight. The film is Scorsese's Gangs of New York, and I struggled with it mainly from an authenticity point of view. I realise this is a historically inspired film, but it's got elements of fantasy, but tries to portray itself as authentic. It's got elements of authenticity, and it just doesn't work for me. And if I'm being completely honest with you, one of the reasons for that is because I don't really like Leonardo DiCaprio as an actor. I realise he does wonderful work, he's a great environmentalist and he's done fantastic things. And as he gets older, I'm learning to enjoy his stuff a little bit more. But that kind of pretty boy look he had in his earlier films, God, it winds me up. And I know I'm being completely irrational, but that's the way it is. If ever anybody had a punchable face, it was DiCaprio in his early films. And I really, really struggle with him playing the part of a tough guy. It just doesn't work for me. You know, I look at him and just go, tough guy? Yeah. I could destroy him. Whether that's true or not, who knows? But anyway, we'll set the scene. We're in Bill the Butcher's, and Gary Lewis, playing McGloin, is facing off against Amsterdam Vallon, played by Leonardo DiCaprio. So we'll see how it starts, and we'll take it from there.
$2 on McGloin.
So the two fighters are staring each other down. Leonardo DiCaprio rips off his coat, they face up against each other, they move into an area, people drag tables out of the way, a strange man plays an unusual instrument, and as if we needed to be reminded that Bill the Butcher's name wasn't a joke, there are some bits of carcass hanging from the ceiling. It all sets the scene very nicely. It's a bit much though, isn't it? Don't you think? But anyway, they drop into their fighting stances, and already I'm kind of hooked. I like this fight just from the stances. See, I keep pointing down here, sorry. That's where the computer is. I've got the picture of the stances here, so when I'm talking to you about them, my mind is looking down at these stances. What I also have down here is one of my books. This is Boxing by Alison Wynne. It's here for a reason. Bear with me, we'll get there. Alison Wynne was a nobleman who developed a liking of boxing while he was at university at Cambridge. He won the Cambridge Middleweight Championship in 1876 and the Heavyweight in 1877 because the Middleweight Championship wasn't challenging enough. Anyway, the reason I'm talking about this is because this particular fight in Gangs of New York is set in 1865, I think, round about then. So, give or take 10 years off what Alison Wynne was doing. And what we have here is Alison Wynne's boxing stances, which, as you can see, are very similar to the stances that are being used in Gangs of New York. Body slightly inclined back, hands extended out, feet in a rough L shape, nice and balanced, weight perfectly prepared, back hand crossing over the solar plexus, guarding the mark, left hand palm upwards, supinated, ready to throw this lead-off strike. That's what I expect to happen next. One of those two fighters is going to lead off with a left, because that's absolutely traditional. That's how people fought. It's described in all of the manuals that we have from that period. Let's see if that's what happens.
Come on, McGloin, it's just a kid.
Can't argue with that. Well, at least not in principle. In practice, yeah, but it's a film, you know. It's a left lead off, it's beautiful. He doesn't drop his weight forwards. You know, fair enough, I can forgive him that. We get a nice little side step afterwards as he moves around. That's quite nice. It's a supinated hand punch which is quite nice. That's pretty much how Donnelly describes it. Alanson Wynne has it rotating slightly more, but yeah, that's neither here nor there. The only thing I take issue with is the fact that he clearly brings it back before throwing it out. And that, I suspect, is part of the fight choreography, just to make it look a little bit more obvious. But, you know, it's the right move. It's exactly what we'd expect to happen. It doesn't have a huge amount of power behind it, but that, again, is probably down to the fight choreography. So let's see what happens next.
It's just a kid.
Oh, bitch, get back and sit down.
Well, what happens next is that this fight develops really quite nicely. The two of them circle round a little, and he throws another straight left lead off, and as you kind of would expect, having been caught by the last one, his opponent this time is a little bit warier and ducks back a little, and it falls short, it doesn't land. But he too has learned from that previous exchange, and instead of just throwing a straight lead, he's throwing 1-2. He throws a rear hand cross, modern terminology, a straight punch with a rear hand, and it is a straight punch. And that's beautiful, that's absolutely typical of the fighting style of the time. So, up to press, this is probably the most authentic fight scene I've seen. Let's see where we go next.
Come on. Watch his left, McGloin. Watch his left.
Again, this is a really nice progression. You can hear someone in the crowd shout, "Watch his left." Absolutely. Watch his left. He's clearly fast, he's clearly accurate, and he can throw that, and he's got more reach. So at this point, the only solution really is for the smaller fighter to get past that and get inside the reach of the fighter with the longer arms. And that's exactly what he does. He ducks down, he slips underneath this one, and he throws a couple of contracted arm strikes into the body. It all gets a bit confusing. The way it's filmed stops us from being able to see accurately what's going on. And directors do this on purpose to try and give us that feeling of confusion that goes into the fights. I don't really like it when that happens, because in all honesty, I don't really feel confused when I'm fighting. I don't even really feel that much pain when I'm getting hit. What I feel is quite calm. I feel cross when I get hit, and I feel almost that I'm concentrating more and I'm able to see what's going on more than I am normally. So when directors purposefully try and make the fight seem really confusing and difficult to follow, that kind of irritates me. But that's probably me. I don't know if that's the same for everyone. Let me know. But anyway, yeah, so we've got these, he gets inside, he gets these contracted arm strikes, he comes up and he throws one around. I think it lands on the face. We can't say for certain, but the two manage to break apart again, and that's that exchange over. So let's see what happens next. Both fighters are a little bit cagier now. They've both caught a few shots and they're a little bit less committed. They throw in a couple just to keep the other person at bay. And Leonardo DiCaprio throws and he gets in close and he tries to land a couple of shots, and they do, they land, but they're not really doing any damage. His opponent at that point is well inside his guard. He grabs him and slams him into the wall. Perfectly acceptable. Bearing in mind, there's probably an unspoken rule set going on here, but the fact is, these guys are just fighting. They're not fighting in an official match. They haven't agreed a rule set beforehand. And whilst they're using historical boxing techniques, this is not a boxing match. And we see this move, this exact move, getting behind somebody and running them face first into a wall in all sorts of source material. Back from 15th century Germany, I think it was Ringeck shows a technique very similar to this, possibly with a tree. All the way through to World War II combatives, we see this very self-same technique. Slam somebody face first into a solid object that's next to you. Very effective, and here it is in the film. So again, I'm really liking this fight. McGloin's got Amsterdam Vallon pinned up against the wall now. I'm not entirely sure how he's managed to get him pinned up against the wall because he's a small man and Vallon's a bigger man. But we'll take that as read, and he knees him in the back of the leg and then he knees him in the other side. I like the technique, you know, it's something you see a lot, attacking the legs, knee to the thigh, the large muscles of the legs. It's a great technique. If you can deaden those muscles, you can damage somebody, you can make it a lot more effective. You can be a lot more effective in beating them. You can slow them down, you can stop them moving around. Why he'd throw one knee with the right and then readjust his balance and throw one with the left, I don't know. Why he wouldn't just keep throwing a few with his right? That's exactly what I'd have done. But then you see the stamp on the foot as well. Another cracking technique. You're not going to see that in boxing treatises, but you do see it in early fighting treatises, and you see it in later fighting treatises. The more sportsman-like treatises of the period in question don't really show this sort of thing. But nothing to stop him doing it, especially with the fact that he's got some fairly big chunky shoes on. That being said, Vallon pushes him backwards and elbows back and catches him, and they go falling away. They both fall to the ground. We're on the ground now, so let's see if we actually carry on fighting on the ground or whether they stand back up. In a purely sporting context at that period, the two would stand up and carry on fighting, standing back in their guards. But in the early rule set, which this appears to be looking at much more specifically, the two would simply carry on fighting on the ground. Let's see. Well, I think that's answered that question. We get a heel kick down onto the floor from McGloin towards Amsterdam Vallon's face. He misses because Vallon rolls out of the way, and he comes up to his knees and he dives across with a pretty wild haymaker to the face, knocks him back down to the ground. This is clearly not a sporting fight. We kind of already knew that, but that's okay. And if anything, that makes this more authentic. Because at the time you had this real rough and tumble style of fighting in America, in the States, and that's exactly what this represents. Catch as Catch Can wrestling had come across from Lancashire, from the northwest of England where it originated, and it had been adopted and was really very popular over in the States at this point. It had been taken on by carnival fighters, by Irish and English immigrants across there, and it was developing this really brutal style. And that's kind of what we're seeing here. It's great. Let's see if the fight finishes on the ground or whether they get back up again. Let's see. I'm quite enjoying it. Hope you are too. Vallon leaps on top of him, swings an arm round and hooks him with a leg and rolls him over. It's a move that if you've watched any MMA or any grappling, you'll probably be familiar with. It's a relatively common move. I'm a little bit disappointed that he appears to be doing the Dread Pirate Roberts choke rather than anything a little bit more accurate than that. I don't see any reason at all why he can't be turning this into a much more effective choke. He's got one arm across and he's holding it in place. McGloin's trying to keep his face down to stop that from choking him out, and that's exactly what you'd expect. He'd be trying to pull the arm away with his hands. He'd be trying to keep his chin low to try and protect his throat. But in all honesty, bearing in mind the prevalence of Catch as Catch Can at the time across the States, what I'd fully expect is either for Vallon to have some ability to use his other hand to kind of pop his head up and across to expose his throat, or to simply turn this from a Dread Pirate Roberts choke into a crossface of some sort. That being said, I still like it. So let's see where it goes next. McGloin manages to roll him over, throws him off, then Vallon leaps on top, gets him with a fish hook, pushes his head into the ground, hooks inside his cheek and starts to pull him up and twist his head round at the same time. I'm just going to show you a brief video.
Why don't you fish hook him next time?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, man. Josh said it was fine. That was me with a training partner of mine and Josh Barnett at the latest UK wrestling, scientific wrestling camp. I'm fairly sure Josh was joking about the whole fish hook thing, but you can see that that's a perfectly acceptable technique in the right circumstances. Obviously not if the rules say not to use it, but if it's there and it's a fight for real, why not take it? It's what Vallon's done.
Alright, that'll do. That'll do.
What did you say now?
That'll do, for Christ's sake. Drag him off.
You got him. Come on.
And there we have the end of the fight. He's dragged off. Bill the Butcher's obviously decided that he's had enough. Clearly at this point Vallon's got the better of him. In all honesty, if I were expecting those two to fight, I wouldn't put any money on DiCaprio. But you know, surprises happen, and it was a great fight. I can set aside my irrational dislikes, and I can watch this and I can really appreciate the fact that somebody's put a bit of time and effort into this. They've researched some authentic positions, some guards, some ways of moving, some authentic techniques, and they've put them together. I think there's a little bit of modern in there, but all in all, I really like it. It's just a shame the rest of the film blows. I hope you've enjoyed this breakdown. I'm gonna keep doing these, but I'd really appreciate it if you've enjoyed this one, or you enjoy them just as a general thing. Please take a look at my Patreon page. You can help support me do more of this, as little as $1 a month. And it does make a huge difference, it really does. I make my living from martial arts, and I love making these fight breakdowns to put out on YouTube for you guys. And if you can make it a little bit easier for me to make my living from martial arts, that would be fantastic. Anyway, I'll quit with the advert now. I'll see you again in the next one.